Jesus says something in Matthew 5:32 that has just been so poorly translated over the years across multiple English translations. Let's go back to the King James Version and Matthew 5:32, where he says, I say unto you, whoever puts away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery. Okay? Let's look at the New American Standard Bible and see what it says. It says, I say to everyone who divorces his wife except for the reason of unchastity makes her commit adultery. This makes her commit adultery? What on earth does that mean? In the 1984 New International Version, it says this, but I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for marital unfaithfulness causes her to become an adulteress. What in the world is this talking about? Well, if we go to the Greek, and we look at this, we look at like what were they translating, what were they even attempting to do, and what is this actually saying? We find quite a different picture. So let's look at this in some Bible software. This is Logos Bible Software, Matthew 5:32, where it says in the NRSV, but I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife except on the grounds of unchastity causes her to commit adultery. We see right here that this word for adultery is a verb, it's in the aorist, and it's passive. This is the most key thing right here, this little letter P. That little P means that this is a passive verb. That means that the person that this verb applies to, someone else is doing this action to them. The way this gets translated, they become an adulteress. They're committing adultery. It puts them in an active sense of the verb, which is not at all accurate with the text. They're receiving an adulterated offense. They're being adulterated by the one who is breaking covenant with them. And that's just a monumental difference between saying that they're someone who's committed adultery. Like, so you didn't do anything really wrong. You didn't commit sexual immorality or whatever, and then your spouse divorces you. And now all these translations have said, if you got divorced, like someone divorced you, and all of a sudden you become an adulterous person, like that's a pretty bad offense. Like we go through the Old and New Testament, that's a huge deal. I want to be completely fair to this topic and give the other side just for a moment. And that is that a number of New Testament commentators on the Gospel of Matthew hold actually to the view that this person does in fact become an adulterer or an adulteress. And the reason they give for that is not that it's an instantaneous thing, that the moment you're divorced you are committing the sin of adultery. But if you go on to read the rest of that verse, it says, and anyone who marries this person becomes an adulterer. And the implication that the scholars give in the commentaries is that if a woman was divorced in the ancient world, she was going to be pretty destitute for the most part. And that meant that she was going to most likely have to remarry. And since her divorce was not a scriptural divorce, it put her in a position of becoming an adulteress. So basically they're saying Jesus is telling these men, don't go around divorcing your wives the way you've been doing it, because you're really putting them in a bad position to do things that they ought not to be doing. You know, don't do that. So that's the rationale for why some newer translations and revisions don't change that, don't fix that, and why some commentators, even some very well-known commentators like Leon Morris and others, hold to this position that they do indeed become an adulterer, an adulteress. Again, not in an automatic, instantaneous sense like the translations, in my opinion, make it sound like, that if you divorce except for this reason, they commit adultery. What they're saying is down the road, as they find themselves in a terrible position and have to remarry after an unscriptural divorce, now they're committing adultery. That's the rationale. The 2011 NIV finally corrected this, and here's what they said. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality makes her the victim of adultery. People have read this verse and agonized over this verse for a very long time because they're the offended party, and they're saying, I'm the offended party, and now I'm an adulteress, now I'm an adulterer because somebody divorced me? Like, that makes zero sense. Well, now you know why that is because in Greek, that word is in the passive voice, which means the adulterating action was done to them. Someone broke the covenant with them, like forced that upon them by no choice of their own, and now they're out. And if you were just reading the English, you would think maybe that you had committed adultery because someone divorced you. Like, how odd is that? Hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon. If you haven't subscribed, now's the time to do it. Catch you later.